Our next speaker is in the Pathways Team Collaboration Level 3 elective, researching and presenting. And he now says 6 to 8. I'm sorry, 8 to 11 minutes. Whoa. So, with that being said, true emergencies are something most of us rarely encounter. When that emergency does arise, how will you react? Our speaker tonight will share some insights. He invites you to ask questions at the end of his presentation. Please welcome Charlie with his speech. Rule number 1.
I want to let you know, I'm a New York boy. It's where I grew up, but my current abode is Versailles, Kentucky. And by all means, that's going to be my final abode, because that's where we love living, and we're going to do it. Warning. Listener discretion is advised. What you're about to hear tonight may be very uncomfortable for you. I'll be talking about death and survival. Now, I'm Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, honored guest. If this is an uncomfortable subject, why am I even talking about it? It's because if more people understand this subject, it might actually save someone's life. Because tonight we're going to be talking about emergency rescues. Have you ever had that image, the fantasy that you were rushing to save somebody in a life-threatening situation? Well, that's the fantasy. But let's just talk a little bit about the realities of that kind of thing. Now, I was prompted to have this speech this evening because I saw 2 articles in the newspaper. One was about 2 police officers who were suspended because they didn't jump in a lake and try to save a drowning man. And the second had to do with a National Guard soldier who jumped into the Rio Grande River trying to save someone, and he died. Now, the press thought that policemen were cowards, and the police thought that that soldier was a hero. The press was wrong on both accounts. Now, Arlen and I have taken part in several rescue training classes and exercises. And water rescues and on-land rescues. And when we go to these classes, in all the emergency training, there is one mantra that comes through loud and clear. Rule number 1. Do not become the next victim. But what does that mean? What that means in a rescue situation, unless you're properly trained and have the proper equipment, do not put your life at risk trying to save another one. Now consider the 2 cases that I just mentioned. Those 2 policemen, they were following rule number 1. Not being trained, they should not have gone in that water. And think about that soldier. He didn't know rule number 1, and he paid a terrible price because of it. Now, water rescues are very difficult. Arlen and I have been involved in many of them, learned the skills, and we've even had an opportunity to exercise those skills. But on one training class that we went to, Arlen was tasked to go get a drowning victim in our scuba training class. And she was going to haul this victim back to the dock where me and another fellow were going to haul that victim out of the water, and we were going to do first aid. It all went well. Arlen got him to the dock. We got him up there, and we're doing first aid, and we are engrossed. When suddenly our instructor says, "Go get Arlen." Arlen, when she got to the dock, was so exhausted that she literally passed out, and she was drifting below the surface. And the two of us had to go into the water and rescue Arlen. But it was a graphic example to us how easily the rescuer can somehow become the victim. Yeah, that can happen. But not all rescues are in the water. When we went through CERT training, which we've gone through many times, you have different scenarios that they teach you, rescue scenarios. But the mantra is always the same. Rule number one, do not become the next victim. Now, one of the scenarios that played out in our training was a building collapse with victims pinned down under the rubble. What do you do? Rule number one says, when you're trying to rescue those victims, you do not put any part of your body under that rubble. Now, in some of these training classes, we did exercises, and we did one on that. And on this one, I was a victim, pinned down with all kinds of debris, and another woman also. We were in a dark warehouse filled with smoke, and we were made up to look like we were severely bleeding. And these scenarios are meant to be very intense, and they are. And this woman, she was penned out. She could have won an Academy Award. She was pleading for help. Please come help me. And the whole thing designed to see if our would-be rescuers could still be disciplined to follow the proper procedures and get us out from under the rubble without putting themselves at risk. Yes, I was under the rubble. But then there's another instance in another training class about traffic emergencies. And they had a video from the dash cam of a police cruiser. And it was a truck, tractor trailer carrying chemicals was overturned. And the driver was out on the pavement, thrown out of the truck. And that policeman, he got out of that thing and he rushed up there to rescue that driver. Only to be overcome with the fumes. And he died right there on the video. It was a terrible thing to watch. But the lesson that we got from there was very clear. Do not rush into a situation that you don't fully understand what's going on. Rule number one. Now, we've been through training for emergencies, first aid, and rescue techniques. But the one training exercise that was most prominent in all of these was rule number one, how to stay alive while you're doing it. It's not all easy. Sometimes it's hard. We have had friends that ended up on both sides of the equation. So why am I having this with you tonight? What is my purpose? Well, number one, so that perhaps you or someone who's with you, when you encounter an emergency, you will not rush in and risk your life. And two, the other side of that is, when you encounter people that are trained rescuers, you'll understand what it is they're doing and why they do the things that they do. Always remember, rule number one, do not become the next victim. Madam Toastmaster. Now I'd like to throw it out open to anyone that might have a question or a comment on this, because this is an intense subject, and perhaps you've had some experience with this subject. Anybody?
Charlie?
Go.
Go, baby.
What do you suggest in terms of practicality if I'm walking by and I see someone, but I can't tell to what degree they might be struggling, and just as like a person on an everyday basis, what's the most effective thing to do when you're in that space of, am I crossing a line necessarily, and who do I call? What do I do?
Well, there's two things. First off, you call 911 or get someone to call 911. And then secondly, you can assess that as long as you're not putting yourself at risk while you're doing it. The real key is don't put yourself at risk. Okay? But if you encounter someone has a problem and you think you can tend to them and you're trained, give it a shot. But before doing that, make sure someone is calling someone who's actually trained to deal with it ahead of the process. We're getting a red light there. Anybody else have anything?
Last thing, is there a website that you guys can share that's a place where we can find out about training, please?
Well, it's called the Community Emergency Response Team,
Okay.
CERT. And I'm sure that if you Google it, you can find that out.
Thank you very much.
They have classes everywhere.
Thank you.
Fayette County starts on July 6th.
Yeah. Arlen says Fayette County starts on July 6th. So Megan, if you want to come down, we'll be happy to entertain you. Did I really say that? All right, no further questions. I'll turn it over to